The story of Israel's journey from slavery to nationhood is often told through the towering figure of Moses, the man who stood before Pharaoh, split the Red Sea, and spoke face to face with God. Yet, woven into this grand narrative is another man, less celebrated but no less vital, Jethro, the priest of Midian, father-in-law of Moses. His role, though often overlooked, became a cornerstone for how Israel would be led, governed, and sustained as a people. To understand Jethro's hidden role, we must first travel back to the wilderness where a fugitive named Moses found refuge. After killing an Egyptian in defense of a Hebrew slave, Moses fled Egypt, weary, hunted, and uncertain of his future. He arrived in the land of Midian, where he sat by a well, a familiar biblical setting where destinies often unfold. There, he encountered the daughters of Reuel, another name for Jethro. They were harassed by shepherds while trying to water their flocks. Moses, trained in Egypt as both warrior and scholar, instinctively rose to their defense. He drove away the oppressors and helped the young women water their sheep. When the daughters returned home earlier than usual, their father Jethro asked, "Why have you returned so soon today?" They replied, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us, and watered the flock." Exodus 2:19. Intrigued, Jethro invited the stranger into his home. This was no ordinary act of kindness, it was the beginning of a bond that would alter Israel's destiny. Jethro gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage, and soon Moses became part of Jethro's household, tending his flocks in the quiet wilderness. For 40 years, Moses lived under the shadow and wisdom of this Midianite priest. We rarely pause to consider what Moses might have learned during these years. Egyptian palaces had taught him strategy, mathematics, and diplomacy. But the desert under Jethro's guidance taught him patience, survival, humility, and the rhythms of nomadic leadership. These were skills he would later need to lead a restless, stubborn nation through wilderness for decades. Jethro is described as the priest of Midian. Scholars debate whether this meant he was a worshipper of the true God or a leader of some tribal religion. But what is undeniable is that he was a man of deep spiritual and social insight. His household welcomed Moses not only as a son-in-law but also as a fellow sojourner. It is worth reflecting here. Sometimes God shapes leaders not only through visions and miracles but through relationships with wise mentors. Jethro was such a mentor to Moses. Long before Moses heard God's voice from the burning bush, he had already been under Jethro's roof, learning to live simply, to listen, and to shepherd. This is no coincidence. The God who would one day call Moses to shepherd his people first trained him to shepherd sheep. And who better to teach him than a Midianite priest, skilled in guiding flocks through barren lands? Family ties also played a key role. Moses, though Hebrew by birth, had lived his early life as an Egyptian prince. He was a man without a true homeland, rejected by Pharaoh's court after his crime, cut off from his Hebrew brethren who didn't yet recognize him as their deliverer. But through Jethro, he found family again. This family bond would later become crucial when Moses faced his greatest leadership crisis. For leadership is not only about vision and courage but also about counsel, and in Jethro, Moses would find both. While Moses was tending Jethro's flock at Mount Horeb, God appeared to him in the burning bush, calling him to deliver Israel from Egypt. We often focus on Moses' dialogue with God, his excuses, and his eventual obedience. But notice what happens afterward. Moses returned to Jethro and said, "Let me go back to my brothers in Egypt to see whether they are still alive." Exodus 4:18. He didn't leave secretly. He didn't vanish into the night. He honored Jethro by seeking his blessing. And Jethro, instead of holding him back, said, "Go in peace." This was not only father-in-law approval. It was a spiritual release, a recognition that Moses was stepping into divine purpose. This small act shows us Jethro's humility. Many fathers-in-law might have resisted, not wanting to lose a son-in-law who had become a strong pillar for the family. But Jethro was willing to let Moses go, because he saw something greater. That willingness to release would later mirror the wisdom he would again offer Moses, helping him release control in leadership and delegate to others. The scene opens in the desert, after the miraculous crossing of the Red Sea. Israel is camped, still overwhelmed by God's deliverance, when Jethro, the priest of Midian and father-in-law of Moses, arrives. He brings along Zipporah, Moses' wife, and the two sons, Gershom and Eleazar. Jethro does not come empty-handed. He comes to witness what God has done, and more importantly, to offer perspective. Though not an Israelite, Jethro recognizes God's hand in the story of deliverance. When Moses recounts to Jethro all the wonders God has done, how the plagues humbled Pharaoh, how the Red Sea swallowed the Egyptian army, and how Israel was preserved in the wilderness, Jethro responds with one of the most striking declarations in Scripture. "Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods." Exodus 18:11. Here is a Midianite priest, a man raised outside Israel's covenant, openly confessing Yahweh's supremacy. His voice echoes as a prophetic witness. God's glory is not confined to Israel, but recognized among the nations. The next day, Jethro observes something troubling. Moses sits as judge from morning until evening. Every dispute, every quarrel, every question, big or small, comes directly to him. He sees Moses' weariness. He sees the long line of Israelites waiting impatiently. And he sees a danger Moses does not see, the risk of burnout and collapse. Jethro does not remain silent. He approaches Moses and says words that are sharp, almost shocking for a son-in-law to speak to one chosen by God. "What you are doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone." Exodus 18:17-18. This is not criticism, it is fatherly love. Jethro sees not only Moses' exhaustion but the stagnation of an entire people, trapped in inefficiency. He dares to speak truth into the ears of a prophet. Jethro offers counsel that becomes a template for leadership for generations. Select capable men of integrity, who fear God, trustworthy and not greedy for dishonest gain. Appoint them as officials, leaders over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Let them judge smaller matters while Moses handles the great and difficult ones. This will lighten Moses' load and allow the people to find justice swiftly. This is the wisdom of structure, the principle of shared responsibility. Jethro teaches Moses and all of us that even the greatest leaders cannot and should not do everything alone. The true greatness of Moses is seen here not in his miracles, not in parting the Red Sea, but in his humility to listen. Moses does not argue, does not let pride blind him. He recognizes wisdom when he hears it, even when it comes from outside Israel. He implements Jethro's advice. Officials are chosen. The burden is lifted. Justice flows more smoothly. The people rejoice. This moment is more than a practical reform. It is the birth of structured leadership in Israel. The seeds of later systems, elders, judges, councils are planted here. Jethro, a Midianite outsider, becomes a hidden architect of Israel's governance. Centuries later, when kings and prophets lead the nation, the echo of Jethro's wisdom still resounds. Leadership is never meant to be carried alone. Lessons. Jethro's role reminds us, wisdom may come from unexpected voices. Pride must give way to humility if true progress is to happen. Delegation and trust in capable hands preserve leaders and strengthen communities. God's purposes often involve unlikely partners.